because we don't really care. We get into our 40s and it starts to become interesting. Where do I come from? And I happened at the time, I was working for Fauquier County, and one of my jobs was to find heir property and find the owner of heir property. And by heir property, I mean property that was inherited down through individuals, so that we could ascertain the owners before we sold it. In Virginia, tax sales aren't the type that you see on TV where you can go and redeem a property and you own it after 2 years. In Virginia, once you sell a property for back taxes, you become the fee simple owner, which means you own it. So I was doing all this research for families in Fauquier. And the reason why that became important, and some of it still goes on a little bit in Loudoun, certainly over the time as development has wound its way west or westward, more counties will be participating in this exercise. But after the Civil War, when property was divided up to former slaves with respect to property, or they purchased property, racism and separation was still alive and well in Virginia and in many states in the South. And the clerks would refuse to file the deed. So folks owned it, but they didn't have any record of ownership. And even if they did have a record of ownership over time, folks would come, they would live on the property. It would be the person who paid the taxes, but then people would move away looking for, you know, as kids do, they grow up and they leave. And before you know it, no one is really living or maintaining the property that once belonged to the family. And so then the taxes wouldn't be paid. I mean, someone would pay them for a number of years and then they would pass away and then no one would continue to pay those taxes. So then my role was to come in to find the heirs of that property, to find out who those owners were so that I could give them notice to see, A, if anyone wanted to redeem that property, catch up on the taxes, work out a payment plan. And if no one did, then after a certain period of time, the process took a significant period of time, and we're going to talk about that extensively, then I would have the property sold. And then any excess funds would go to the heirs of the property after the taxes were paid. So as I'm researching everyone else's family tree in Fauquier County, I thought, well, where do I come from? I knew nothing about my family tree. I mean, I had the rumors, right? 3 brothers moved here, Pennsylvania, then they all kind of spread out, which is not the case in my family at all. But, you know, we have these family legends and when I first started doing the research, the censuses weren't even indexed yet. So in order to find out where your folks actually lived and what property they may have owned, it really helped if you had a geographic area. Otherwise, you were painstakingly searching lot by lot, address by address. It was important to know the friends of the, you know, other family members and friends of the family or witnesses to wills so that you could kind of narrow down where you needed to be looking for censuses. So it was great when they finally indexed the censuses. So I will get into a little bit of that. But today's primary focus of this exercise is records that are available from the local courthouses. And again, thanks to technology, we no longer have to travel to each courthouse, although that was lovely. And I'm sure the clerks enjoyed it to some extent, meeting new people, but they also have other work to do than to talk to people who are very excited to find out about their family. But with that, again, I will take questions throughout the presentation and just raise your hand and I will call on you. Now, before actually I get started, where are we in our ancestry journey? If you feel like sharing, if you don't want to share, that's fine, but I'll start with this.
Me?
Yes, you.
Oh,
Are you a novice, a beginner? You've been doing this a while?
I've been doing this since 1990
Okay.
and pretty much found most of this stuff.
Mhm.
Although it's really interesting for me to hear you talk about abandoned properties because we do have Eastern Kentucky, somebody where there was like disputed land and so, yeah.
Mhm.
Who knows who owns it? We probably have a claim on it. And so that's what that would be a knot to untie.
Right? Yeah.
Oh, a long time.
Okay.
But I'm really stuck on some Irish research.
And also, just so, the people in the room know, we are being recorded and we do have a virtual audience. So if you're speaking from the crowd, make sure you project.
Okay,
Thank you.
so a long, long time.
Yeah.
A long time. My family came very early and I haven't found very much about the first person that was here, which I believe was an indentured servant in the
Mhm.
1600s to Virginia. But
Okay.
other than that, I haven't found anything about him.
All right. You, yeah, white sweater.
So, well, my sister's the one that took over, researching our family, so, she went back, so my mother is, English and Chinese. So the English part was easy,
Mm-hmm.
because we had a family member that took the tree back into the 1600s in Wales. And, the Chinese part, no.
That's what he's,
And the Italian part, she went back part of it, because my father was Italian, and that went back far until she got to an area of them just coming over, and then she knows where my grandparents came from in Italy, but other than that, everything's in Italian.
all right, wonderful.
Well, my family on my mom's side, we traced our roots back 5 generations. And we, know that we came from Senegal, Mali, and we also know the names of my 4th great grandmother and grandfather. And we currently have a family reunion each year. We have about 600 or 700 people show up around the country.
Wow, that's great. That's great. My family were Mennonites, so you can imagine how exciting those family reunions were. You know, not to say that they weren't fun, but, you know. They were, you know.
I've done ancestry research on my family, but unfortunately for me, there's no one left in my immediate family who can verify anything.
Mhm.
What I'm trying to do is figure out when my house in Hamilton was built.
Okay, all right, all right.
I'm from Leesburg, or the Loudoun area all my life. And my cousin, who recently passed away, was the oldest member of our family. And he had done a tremendous amount of research, but he could never really explain the name change in the family. He believes he's got it all the way back
Mhm.
to the Isle of Wight, but I'm not convinced that we didn't come out of Pennsylvania. So, that's where I'm stuck.
Okay, all right. And then when this is over, you're gonna have to explain that T-shirt for me. Yeah.
Barbecue in
Oh, barbecue.
Eastern North Carolina.
Okay. Oh, okay, all right. I get it. I didn't see the back. I'm like, I don't get the Piggly, and
Yeah.
Okay.
It's actually
Grocery store.
a grocery store.
Yes, yes. Okay, I get that now.
Kidding.
Yeah, so
I'm
All right.
That's funny.
All right. Well, so when we're all done, we're gonna have to have a barbecue. Tasting contest. That's great. No worries, no worries. That's why I do this. I mean, I love getting to know everybody here. All right, so the first thing that we need to figure out is where is the courthouse, right? Because if you don't know where the courthouse is, it makes it very difficult to do meaningful research. And that's not to say that we're not going to be up at 3 a.m. now searching the internet looking for things, but it does help if you're really determined you do need to figure out where the courthouse is today. Courthouses are generally located in the county seat. And then you have to determine the name of the county. And you may think, oh, we're in Loudoun County, easy peasy. Well, how long have we been in Loudoun County? Well, apparently Loudoun County's only been around 250 years. So if we're looking for records older than 250 years, then we'll be looking in a different county. So we have to determine the date of incorporation. Once we determine that, we look for from where did Loudoun County, where did it come from? Where was it birthed? And is the courthouse in a county, city, or town? In Virginia, we have towns, which are municipal entities. We have cities and we have counties. Counties have courthouses. Cities have courthouses. Towns generally do not, with the exception of one in Virginia. I think there's one town that has a courthouse. that's independent and that runs its own school system and all of that sort of thing. Normally, a town will convert to a city if they want to have that autonomy from the county. Now, any of you from the Midwest or have been subject to the Northwest ordinance where it's nice and organized and we all know where the county seat is and everything's mapped off in 6-mile increments and we know where millages are paid from. Well, that's not Virginia, right? It's not Virginia. It was a wake-up call when I moved here. I had to rethink how I designed my world. So it's been interesting, and certainly counties, cities and towns used rivers and other types of landmarks to make demarcation points. Like, so for example, DC was kind of this weird triangle, but then they de-accessioned a portion of it. I think it's back to they gave it back to Alexandria, so which is why it looks the way that it does. But if you really get into how things are laid out, you can still see the markers of the de-accession points with respect to DC. And Virginia doesn't really have those, but they do have tree stumps and rocks and rivers and really big trees. But these are all clues with respect to where your family may have lived throughout the Commonwealth. Now, since I started my family journey when I worked in Fauquier, I'll start with Fauquier. That was incorporated in 1759, but it came from Prince William. So Fauquier was part of Prince William. Prince William was formed in 1731 from Stafford and King George. And then there's a whole bunch of other little breakups. And then Stafford, if you go all the way back to the beginning of the Commonwealth, when it was a colony, Stafford was formed in 1664 from North Cumberland. And again, a lot of these names came from gentry from England, right? And they were given as awards or rewards for coming over here and settling Virginia. So North Cumberland is the bigger area. And there were 2 or 3 big areas in Virginia from which we all, that formed the basis of where we are today. Now, a lot of this applies to Loudoun, and I will get to Loudoun, but Fauquier County records, what they keep in the courthouse is court records from 1831 to the present. They have the birth and death records from 1853. They have the criminal records, deeds, and wills. And then they have loose papers that have yet to be indexed, including slaves, indentured servants, the names of roads, the mills, and then, of course, the chancery suits, which I will be discussing today. Back when you used to get married, you used to have to post a bond, or they called them bands, where you'd publish for 2 weeks someone is going to get married. And then there's also miscellaneous papers that are kept that are of historical interest. And again, Loudoun County does the same thing. Loudoun County was formed from Fairfax, Lord Fairfax. Yeah, I'm sure we've all heard of him, in 1757. In Fairfax, there's Fairfax County, and then there's Fairfax City. So in the middle of the county, there's, I don't know if it's exactly in the middle, I'm terrible with directions. There's Fairfax City, and they have their own general district court and their own circuit court. I sometimes sit in Winchester or Frederick County. It's the same building, right? The same judges in that circuit. We ride the circuit. In the same building, we have Winchester City and Frederick County. And then adjacent to Frederick County is Clark County, but they have their own courthouse. So you have to keep in mind, what are you looking for and where are you looking for it? So, for example, Winchester City, which is part of Frederick County, Fairfax, well, it's separate from Fairfax County, but it's located in the county inside. And then the same with Fairfax. So if you have relatives in those areas, back in the day, you'd probably be visiting 2 separate courthouses, right? Now, of course, you can get a lot of it online. You don't have to visit anywhere separately. Yes, ma'am.
So the idea of Virginia's localities is what you could use to help figure out if they likely have
Yes.
their own courthouse.
Yes.
It would be all the localities.
It'd be all the localities. And then there's transition years, right? When Loudoun, Well, more recent one is Culpeper. I think Culpeper was also part of the Prince William Planning District. Well, it's not Planning District 8 anymore, but there's going to be an overlap, right? So I was doing a boundary line adjustment. I think it was someone wanted from Fauquier to Stafford. And so we had to go back and find those records. And so they were located in both different counties, again, because there's a transition. It's not nice, neat, and cut, so it doesn't hurt to do a little bit of extra, okay, well, maybe 5 years or look where your family was, because things weren't always divided up neatly. In fact, in Middleburg, some properties are both in Fauquier and Loudoun, right? It goes through their living room. So the boundary line adjustments are not equal, right? And how do we know that? Because sometimes they'll show up in a county planning office and want to do something to their driveway. Well, no, sir, your driveway's actually in Fauquier. So, and how they divide up the personal property taxes. I mean, it hasn't been all that long since I moved to Virginia, that they finally sorted out the boundary between West Virginia and Virginia, depending on and it came up because of emergency services, right? Who's going to be providing emergency services? Which way did the river fall? And all of this kind of thing. And, people get very territorial about their land. And you may know this or may not know this, but the Potomac River is owned by Maryland, right? And you know who did that deal? George Washington. I was recently at Mount Vernon and I didn't, because I always thought, obviously the Leesburg utility department had first access to the Potomac and to provide water. And of course, I'm sure you've all heard about the water rate case. I still live it. But it was interesting to find out who actually owned the river, the limited rights that Virginians have to that river, and even putting in pipes to the river has to be negotiated with Maryland, and you have to be nice to them so you're just not pulling up silt, right? I did make sure that the Loudoun County intake was below Leesburg so that we got the fresh water first. But in any event, and the limited rights that we have as Virginians with respect to the use of the Potomac, like we just can't go put a dock in if we want to. So anyway, I digress. All right, Loudoun County records, aliens, people who moved here, birth and death records from 1912, business licenses, criminal deeds, wills, slave issue papers, marriage bonds, miscellaneous, some Revolutionary War and Civil War documents. And each courthouse has a different date of records, right? Loudoun only had birth and death from 1912. Fauquier had them earlier. So
I'm so late.
I'll have to ask Mr. Clemens. I'm sure he knows. And now I'm going to go through just in general what you are going to find in particular types of documents. By show of hands, who has a will? By show of hands, who went to Staples or some online entity and had your will drawn up? Thank you. Because what I get to hear are those who think, oh, I can just get a form from Staples and make this will work. That's not the way it works. Generally, wills should be drawn by an attorney. It needs to be executed by 2 people. Well, 3 people actually, myself and 2 witnesses. The witnesses should be unrelated to me. Holographic wills are still valid. That's when you handwrite a will. And there's been some recent legislation talking about how some of these forms can be considered holographic. Why risk it? But a holographic will has to be signed and it has to be dated. And there needs to be witnesses to verify the handwriting, and it has to be in my hand. So what happens many times, there will be a will and I get mad at one of my 4 children, crossing you out, putting your other brother in, you're going to get this, you're going to get that. And does it start to invalidate the will? This is just a public service announcement. just do it more formally so that you don't end up in front of a judge trying to ascertain what the intent of the testator was. Were you mad that day or were you mad for good, right? If you've all had kids, it's like, I'm going to ground you for life, and my husband's, no, you really can't do that. I'm like, yeah, I really can. But we all know how that works out. Now, why are wills important? Wills are important because it gives us the date of the death, which may not always match up to the date, well, it will not match up to the date of probate. And when you've done research, you'll notice that sometimes there's a difference in the date of death, and it may be off by a week, it may be off by a couple of months, it may be off by a year. There may be a different date on a find a great tombstone and a different date in the record. That's because of the probate date, right? And it may be that the will was executed just a couple of days before they died, so someone picks that date up. They're just picking up points of data and they're inputting it. And so that's why your dates of death doesn't necessarily mean a different person, although apparently in my family tree, everyone liked the name John and James, and they all had the same last name, and they were all cousins. And then when one woman would die, they would marry the other cousin of the woman with the same name. So it makes it very confusing, but it doesn't mean that it's a different person if the date of death is off. So you do need to do additional research to nail down that record. So it has the date of death. With respect to the probate record, it has the residence of the testator and the family. Where were they living? It might describe the farm because they're bequeathing it, and they'll say the Smith farm or your family name farm, and then that's also a hint. Who the heirs are. Now, it may be that they had 10 children, and it may be that they didn't leave any of the property to their daughters because the husband, of course, would take care of the daughter. But it will give the last name of the daughter. So my maiden name was Disbro, and it'll say to Amy, Amy now Smith, because let's say my relative married someone named Smith. But it gives me her married name. And it's harder sometimes to follow the maternal line than the paternal line because women had a tendency to change their names. And if they remarried more than once, then there is more than one name change. So that's helpful. Even if they weren't inheriting the property, they would be listed, right? And then it would also give the first name of her husband. If you're having trouble tracking down Amy, you can find it via John Smith, right? Wife, what the wife gets, at a minimum, she would get dower, which is 1/3 of any real property that they were seized in during the lifetime of the testator. And seized in means living on, doesn't mean all real estate. It means the ones that they were living on, being that you didn't want to throw out widows and children to the street. They had an interest in real estate. At a minimum, it could be partitioned and she'd get 1/3 of that interest, but at least there was some monies to take care of her. Who the beneficiaries were. I know there was a lot of family lore about my family, and the only time you hear about this stuff is at funerals, right? And back in the day, people didn't talk about the family stuff unless they were at a funeral and had a few celebratory drinks, and then you would hear about what went on. However, people were disinherited all the time, right? And or they may have left their property to someone else. And it's just nice to have that list of name of the beneficiaries because it can also tell you who your family was acquainted with and in what context they were acquainted with. Witnesses were often neighbors. And this becomes important before they index the census because I was trying to trace down my mom's family and everything my mom told me just wasn't true. She believed it. It just wasn't what actually happened. She believed that her mother was disinherited when she married a Catholic. Right, and that her dad cut her off and it had nothing further to do with her. It turns out when my grandmother married her husband, my grandfather, they were given property by her father and they lived right next door. So whatever the break was, it wasn't because she married a Catholic. And by the time I found this out, and when I explained this to my mother, she's like, nope, that's not true. I'm like, Mom, I have the records right here. You know, they're like literally living right next door in the family farm. They built a house. It was like 3 years after that something went south and my mom didn't know what it was and she was still challenging me. And I'm like, well, and of course, everyone who actually knew the story had passed, right? So there was no way to actually figure out what happened, but I know it wasn't because they married a Catholic because they still had a close relationship, close enough for my great grandfather to give his daughter property and in the name with her husband. So again, we have these family legends that can be challenged based on something as simple as tracking down, when I was trying to track down the census and finding out who the neighbor was. It also gives you an indication of the value of the estate, how much real estate was owed, and the personality in that estate. And so to us, 10 pots of pans and an ox and, you know, a plow may not seem like a lot, but in the context of the time period and where they were living, that could be an indication of wealth, right? And the minutia to which they would give things like my blue dress goes to so-and-so. This mare goes to so-and-so. Not in my family tree. Excuse me, it was a family tree in Fauquier and they lived up on this mountain. They had a grand piano up there, right? Someone was gifted that grand piano and I always wondered, how did they get that piano down the mountain? Well, apparently they didn't because it was still sitting up there when I was trying to sell the property. The house had crumbled around it, but like, I don't know how they got it up there, but they left it up there. So whoever was gifted the grand piano, yeah, so. But again, it gives you, and it kind of tells you what was important to them, you know, and if they were farmers, a lot of our ancestors were farmers, you know, we had the pigs and the sows and yes, ma'am.
So one of the family histories was that, one of the girls got the feather mattress, but she had cerebral palsy
Okay,
and she was a twin, you know?
yeah,
So you get
little flavors of, yeah, trying to take care of their family. Now, the other thing that you're going to find at courthouses are land records. What are land records? Land records are basically deeds. They will have the grantor-grantee indexes, which is who gives what to whom. Tax records, property tax records. It will have pictures of plats. It will have a trust or the reference to a trust, wills, and then of course warrants and debt. Wills used to be filed with the courthouse, right? When an attorney did a will, excuse me. I'm a serial sneezer. Oh, sneezer, sorry, I sneeze more than once. Used to be filed with the courthouse, and open to the public. You still can't get access to it online. The probate portion of the website is, limited. And it's funny because before the internet, some of us probably had more access to documents, death records, birth certificates, wills and that sort of thing. But once people were able to easily ascertain information and then abuse it for their own purposes, then things have been kind of shut down. So our privacy is somewhat more protected via that route. But in general, you can get access to this online, but this is a paid subscription. Otherwise, you get to go to the courthouse and you can look at it for free via computer. Then you can ask for that record, but it's not available for online free. Yes, ma'am.
So one thing I don't understand is, when you look up wills, they'll have the date and the will, but what actually happened? Did they have that will at home already prepared and then just bring it in when
Yeah.
death occurs?
So both. So today, somebody dies and things happen pretty immediately, right? Your Social Security gets canceled. right? Like within days, I think that's the first thing they did for my mother. Oh, no more social security. Okay, she just died yesterday. How do you know? I haven't even gone to the funeral home yet, right? But back in the day, people didn't, it wasn't an easy trip to the courthouse. They went to the courthouse when it was convenient or they had other business at the courthouse. And that's why sometimes there's a lapse when the deed, like let's say the deed was signed in January. Well, they didn't go to the courthouse until August to record that deed, if the clerk let them record that deed, right? But if the deed was recorded, it's, let's say, 7 or 8 months after the deed was actually executed. So until you record the deed, you haven't put anyone on notice that you own the property. And Virginia is a notice state, you have to record that deed. And in the meantime, between you executing that deed and it getting recorded, let's say I was a terrible person and I'm just giving deeds, quitclaim deeds to anyone else to pay off debt, there could have been multiple deeds out there that have been recorded or liens clouding your title. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, about how that works, a hardship for some family. But yeah, the date of signing the deed is not the date of the recording of deed. Those are two separate events. And if any of you have ever transacted real estate, now a title company does a lot of it, but there used to be the closing date and it was recorded the date of closing, right? And you know, your attorney, you know, they had to go down to the courthouse and get that deed recording, and you didn't do closings on days that the courthouse was closed because you wanted to make sure that the title transferred and the money transferred on that day. Now they come to your house with a packet of papers and you sign a bunch of forms and heaven knows what happens to it. So sometimes they get recorded. All right, deed terminology. What are you going to find in the deed? Person who gave the property. So I'm giving the property to Joe. Grantee, the person who's receiving the property. Consideration, it can be for money, it can be for cash, it can be for goods, it can be for love and affection, a deed of gift where no money, the consideration is just for love and affection, I'm deeding a gift. You can convey to your heirs and assignees. You can retain a life estate. Let's say I was just the sole owner of the life estate and I have this property and I could say, I own this property, I'm retaining a life estate, but I'm gifting it to one of my children. But I get to keep it as long as I'm alive. And then when I die, it goes to my kids. That's a life estate. I'm retaining the right to live there during my life. Gives a property description, which became important when you didn't really know where your folks were, but you knew they had the good friends, you know, they had good friends named Piggly Wiggly. So you found the Piggly Wigglies and you knew your family was close to the Piggly Wiggly and you have a property description. So then you can start on the plats looking for, because they used to say, you know, property owned by Smith, property owned by Jones. Even if you look at the old Leesburg Town map, we don't have one in here, but it has the names of the owners and the lot names of the lot owners. And that's how you could kind of find people. So if you knew someone within the sphere, so for example, the will, and they had their friends sign as witnesses, okay, well, I know they were close to the Jones, so I'm going to look for property owned by the Jones and maybe in relation to each other. Again, these are fitting pieces of a puzzle together when you're really stuck. So it's very helpful with respect to plats, and I use plats a lot when I was doing heir property. Property description, whether or not there would be a dower interest. Types of deeds, was it a quitclaim deed? Was I just giving the interest that I had, but not the interest that perhaps my spouse had? So I'm quitclaiming my deed to you. You get my share of whatever that share may be, whether it's 10%, 20%, 50%. But the remainder, the rest of the deed is remaining with the person who still has an interest. So you're only getting the interest that I have, not anyone else's interest. And again, this becomes important. Warranty deeds with English covenants of title. That's the best kind of deed that you have. If you're transacting real estate and you're buying real estate, you do not want a quitclaim deed, right? Because you are taking it with the understanding that someone else may have an interest in part of my property. So you want a general warranty deed. Deed of gift, again, You're looking for witnesses on that deed again. We didn't used to transact real estate in a title office, right? It could be around the family table. You know, do you want the property? No, I don't want it. I'm moving away from here. I'm gonna go find my fortune elsewhere. And they're all standing around and they write out, you know what, this property is going to my brother Don, and you know, it wasn't real formal. They would give a description. Sometimes they would draw a picture. They would say how far the horse galloped, whatever it is, to this tree, to that rock, to this stream. They sign it and you have a deed. I don't think you get away with that now. I don't know that the clerk would accept it as a recorded document, but that's what we were working with, right? And as time went on and until the property becomes valuable to someone else, no one really cared.
Can
Yes,
you talk about what indenture means? I mean, often I say this indenture,
indenture means a debt.
a debt.
A debt. So one of my first relative that came over from my dad's side was an indentured servant. And he was indentured for a period of 7 years. And he came over from England. And so he had to work 7 years for someone. He owed a
I'm
debt.
talking about in the deed. This indenture made between.
It's a debt.
It's the same.
It broadly means a debt, right? We're paying off something. And again, things that you find in the deed, were pretty much, you know, the names of the grantors. Where was the deed executed? Right? Sometimes it'll say where it was actually executed. If they had a notary, right? Was it executed in the next county over? It'll have the date that it was executed, the date that it was recorded. And did your loved one, were they literate? Were they able to sign their name, or was it with an X? Right? What's the consideration? The property description, and then sometimes deeds will reference other documents such as wills, right? And it will give you, again, these are all clues if you're searching in a court record for family. Now, legal suits, basic legal suits, the one attorney in the room notwithstanding. Legal suits in general, the overall thing that we call this stuff is pleadings, right? They're pleadings. It's going to have the names of the parties. Be creative with your spelling. Just because you spell your name John, John, doesn't mean that you don't look for Jon or Jonney. Or you don't look for chip off the old block, right? You need to be creative with your spelling. What type of matter is it? Up until about 20 years ago, Virginia had, and these aren't the records that you're searching, but just if you have to look for something more recent. If you saw the first two letters were CL, that meant a matter at law, a matter where there was law, a matter that could be decided by a jury, right? And there was a statute or common law that dealt with the matter. Then you had chancery matters. The first two digits are CH. And we're going to be dealing mostly with chancery records today. Those are your probates, your wills, your real estate. Those are matters generally not heard by a jury, just a judge, but it used to be delineated by CH. And then you had criminal matters, CR. Someone had the bright idea. Let's just merge them all together. We're all going to have one CL case. So we still have CRs, but we're going to get rid of CH. And I thought, well, good, because the other 47 states have merged it together. And but when they did it, they merged the law together. What Virginia did was you still have issues in chancery that can't be heard by a jury. So all they did was change the first two letters, confuse the heck out of everybody. Instead of saying complaint and petitioner, it was always plaintiff and defendant, but half of us still use petitioner. We still use complaint instead of motion for judgment. I mean, I'll just leave it at that. They didn't truly blend courts of equity and courts of law. They're still technically separate. It's a minefield for attorneys. All right. You can go online. Loudoun has the same thing, Fauquier County Real Estate Online. Again, some of it, this is somewhat free. You can get the basics, and I'm gonna talk about the Botts case. I had the pleasure of meeting the Botts family. They had some valuable real estate in Fauquier. It was a big family. They'd all moved away or died, right? And they owned quite a bit of acreage. So how I start was with this record, and you see John M. Botts Estate. And then under that, you see Hunter B. Chapman trustee. And the mailing address was Culpeper. Remember what I said about Culpeper? This was actually in Fauquier. It's not Culpeper. But at one point, someone thought it was in Culpeper. So, yeah. Yeah. And then, you know what it has on here? See book and page. You're going to find in book 133, page 122, a will. You're going to find two wills, and then 61, 165, right? Look at the hints. Then you're going to get some transfer notes. And then in 1992, Donna Taylor gave to Hunter B. Chapman by a deed something about this property. So I've got to look up that deed. And then Ruth Taylor gave to Chapman something else in a deed. And then look, there are 17 additional heirs. Yeah, right? Wow, oops, what did I do? Okay. Pretty cool, huh? So I got involved with the Botts family, and so I had to find the heirs. And if I couldn't find an heir that wanted to redeem it, and I could only let them redeem, I couldn't give them clear title, because this is what happened to the Botts family. There was a man named Hunter B. Chapman, and he did this with a lot of properties in Fauquier. He was taking the long view. He would see that these properties, the taxes weren't being paid, or these folks owed debt, let's say to the hospital. He'd say, you know what, Ruth? So you owe $1,000 to Fauquier Hospital. I'll pay off the hospital, but if you would quit claim your interest in your family land to me. And Ruth's like, heck, I don't live there. I live in Maryland. What do I care about this property? I'm never going back to Fauquier. It doesn't have a house on it. It doesn't perk. Sign away she does. Okay. And he did that with a lot of the Bott family members who had moved out throughout the DMV area, and none of them were living in Fauquier. So as part of my role, what I would have to do is I would have to clear up the title. And when I would clear up the title, I would hire a title examiner, an expert. This is Mr. Herndon. And he would do research on the title. And then he files a certificate of title in this chancery lawsuit. So what you're going to find in the certificate is, first of all, a great property description. And I love this. All this certain parcel of land bounded by as follows: stone corner from Mr. Dodd. And then we have a little bit of a legal description: north 16.5 to west 36.7 poles. At least we know what the pole measurement is. To a cherry tree, which I'm sure is still there, right? To his corner, to James Bussey, okay? And what if my family knew the Bussey family? Again, a good hint. And then to this line, poles. And then to a stone, love this, a stone, and Leland Warren's line, and then containing 5 acres more or less. And this is the property I'm trying to sell. This is a legal description that I have that I'm trying to sell. Less than except, oh, by the way, we took some property out. And then parcel 2. So again, it's a pretty interesting way to describe property. The horse galloping one is my favorite. You know, horse gallops for 10 minutes and that's where the property line is. But anyway, so in the certificate of title, this is what you are going to find in a chancery file for your property. He's laid out the property, and then he talks about the judgments. And so remember when I talked about Ruth? Well, here's Donna. Donna has a judgment that was filed against the lien, that was filed against the property. They couldn't find Donna, but they knew that she owned property. And it just talked about all the liens with respect to this property. So before I can sell it, I have to pay off the liens, right? So also, let me go back, I'm gonna skip this one. How do I find it? How do I find this lawsuit? Remember, we used to have civil, criminal, and chancery. Now you just click the civil box, put in the name, search by name, and that's going to bring up the lawsuit. And look at all the bots, right? And what's interesting about this, so the plaintiff is the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors because I'm representing the Board of Supervisors in selling this property. The defendants are the relatives. But what's interesting, it tells what's going on. It says there was a trial with witnesses. This isn't. But I get a list of the heirs, right? Who are these people? It's a big family, right? Then you can bring up the pleadings page, and same thing for Loudoun. It's free that you can bring up. It can tell you what happened in the court hearings. I guess, well, this is how long I've been doing this. It's 2002. But what's really interesting, so we have Hunter B. Chapman, who is on the other side of the V. It's the Fauquier County Board of Supervisors, and everybody else is on the other side of the V, including Hunter, because I have to give Hunter notice too. But it tells me how I was able to serve people. So Hunter, in person, right? John Jenkins, who was an heir, posted. Winchester in person. So, but look here, look for a family member. Mary Tyler, who's, a granddaughter of Mr. Bott. She was served by a family member. So I'm going to have an address when I go look in that file. I'm going to be able to find this person. Then Carl Fowler, he was another person who also did deeds from family members. Who else have I got here? Then I have the not found, couldn't find Donna. Then we also have registered agents, or those are folks who represent different entities. But what's nice about this, if I've served with an in-person or family member, I know they're still around and their address is here. Now for the people that, yes.
Just a quick question. Do you access those from your home or?
Yes, yep.
Okay.
These are
thanks.
access from my home. This part is access from my home. The detail of the records, you can't get at home, but this kind of stuff you can get from home. Who was served, what proceedings are going on, that sort of thing. That's home free. Now, but in the file, this you can't access from home, you're also going to get an abstract. Many years ago, before we all bought title insurance, we could do what's called an abstract of title. I don't even know if you can do an abstract anymore. But an abstract of title tells you everything about this property from when records were beginning, right? From the very beginning. And this abstract of title I had filed with the court, and that's someone physically going to the courthouse and doing the record search. And what's in the abstract of title? Looky here, a family tree. Isn't that cool? Now, we have from the very beginning, this property in book 80, page 31, 5 acres. Leanna Holmes for life, so she had a life estate. Then left to her children or her, I guess, husband Arthur. And then Eleni Holmes, her kids. Then it transferred again, book and page 12640. And to Randolph Holmes. And this would be 1916, right? And it goes all the way down until it gets to Botts, right? Botts buys it, page 132, 244, Walter Botts, he died in 1957, will, book and page. And these are all his heirs. So bingo, right? Someone has done an abstract of title, which is a pretty good, I mean, these are things that are used in court to prove chain of custody. Also in that file, you're gonna, I had to have a commissioner in chancery appointed. She was like the repository of the information that we would find. And she would conduct a hearing where she would invite all the heirs who were interested to come and tell their story about this property and why they had an interest or they may not have had an interest. So we have a hearing, and then for the unknown people, for the people that I cannot find, I have to ask the court to appoint a guardian. And then the guardian also has a certain obligation under law to do additional research, to notify the unknown heirs or to represent their interest if they cannot be found. So it talks about everybody who is there and who's at this hearing, the creditors, some of the heirs, those who have interest in the property, a court reporter, so you could get the transcript, the appraiser, that's Al Henry, and then of course the person who did the title search. And she writes a report, and in her report, she puts the value of the property, she puts the testimony, she describes who the owners are or who she has determined the owners are, the costs, how much is being taken out. And then at the end, she has this lovely chart. Who's going to get what and in what share? Thank goodness I didn't have to do this. So John Botts was the one who started, and then he died without a will. He was married to Maud Botts, who died prior to John, and they had 9 children. And because he died without a will, he's died intestate, right? So we start out with his 9 kids. And then, you know, they each have their, let's say, we'll make it easy, 1.11 share of this property. And then if they died without a will, or even if they did die without a will, and how it transformed to their children. But it's nice because we have Turner Botts. We don't know when he died. He had a spouse, he had 2 kids, right? And then we have Henry Botts when he died and his spouse. And then we have George. Again, it goes through everybody in his family tree. If we could all be so lucky if we had a chancery file that had all this information. Now, I'm not saying that you will find something like this, but they are out there. But there are chancery files that, while they may not have all this information, they will certainly have some information. So how do you find it? Many years ago, different groups, including the DAR, of which I was a member, went to the courthouses and started scanning and indexing these records. And in conjunction with a grant from the Commonwealth of Virginia, they put it all together in a repository. And how do you find this index? The Library of Virginia is such a vast repository of documents. I went to a presentation by the gentleman who ran this program. I said, how do you get to the landing page for the chancery record? Like, because I would go to the Virginia Library website and I'd have to click 15 times. He goes, I just Google it. All right, so Google it. Go to Chancery Index, Virginia Memory, and it will bring you to the landing page instead of going through the Library of Virginia website, because there's so much on it now, you'd be clicking forever. And as you know, and I know when we stay late up at night, we start pulling a thread, you don't want to be on that thread for 3 days, right? So if you're looking for a chancery record, that's where you go. So anyway, I'm gonna take you out to the website. Or not. Oh, here we are. Okay, so this is live. We're live on the website. So the first thing, do as I say, not as I do. Read the instructions, right? I'm always so easy, like I just want to click, I want to get in there, I want to start playing with it, right? Exactly. I have some of my peeps here. And then I find, oh, like, you know, I could have saved myself a lot of time had I just read the very first page. So first of all, it talks about what's available. So if you start searching for a county where the records have not been indexed, you're kind of wasting your time. So what's happened is over time, this has become more robust. They have filled in, like when I first started using this umpteen years ago, not all of these records were here, but we have Accomack County. So from 1718 to 1912, the bulk are from 1870 to 1912. So it's warning you, you know, there's a few records prior to that date, but not a lot. And again, Alexandria, Allegheny, and what have we got for Loudoun? But and this is why it was important to know what county or locality you're in, because it's not a search of everyone at the same time, it's a search by county. So Loudoun County, 1758 to 1912. Those are the records that you can expect to find online. Okay, so I'm gonna go back. So frequently asked questions. It talks about what's new, right? Because they're constantly updating this collection. Talks about exhibitions, news feeds, site search, site map. A lot of websites have now taken their site maps off, which is a shame because if you really get stuck, you can always go to search site map and sometimes you can find the page. Anyway, it defines what a chancery cause is. Chancery cause is a case in equity where justice is administered according to fairness as contrasted with strictly formatted rules of common law, right? In layman's terms, it's not one that can be readily decided by existing written laws. So what kind of records does a chancery have? The locality where it was recorded, the index number, the primary names of the plaintiffs and defendants. That should be complainant and respondent, by the way. Surnames of others involved in the case. So if there was witnesses or subpoenas sent, it will have that. Wills, local case number, plats, and allows you to locate where the case is. Index numbers that begin with 111 denote a case for which the year could not be determined. Why can't I find my locality? That's why you go to what's available. Loose papers, it defines what those are. They can be arranged chronologically or alphabetically. And how do I get copies? Okay, all very helpful information. Search tips. I think if you guys have used the internet, you know, there's no wildcards, right? You have to have a minimum to fill in. The default search is all localities. Good luck with that. You may select multiple localities by using the control key, but if you have a name like Smith, don't bother, it'll freeze your computer. And then we have, don't use punctuation, right? So no periods and commas. And then the following abbreviations were used for data entry: and, bro, brothers, company, corporation, Inc. And no is number, right? And then it has a tip sheet on finding slave names in the chancery records. Okay. So we're going to go to the index. So we'll start, anyone from Loudoun who wants to search a Loudoun record? Okay. Give me a name, last name.
G-H-E-E-N.
G-H-E-E-N. Okay, so we have a Thomas Geen. Is this your relative? And it tells me I have, the defendant was Adam Douglas. And then we have a Thomas Geen, Henry Evans, and then it looks like we have a will or something. So let's look at this one. First of all, at the very top, it's 22 pages. Tells me who the plaintiffs are, surname, scanned format. There's not a will, no plat. Okay, so depending on what you're looking for, depends on how quickly you want to go through this thing. So all of these files, like this is the original handwriting. It's called a red wall. Have you ever seen those old big red legal files? They had a piece of paper wrapped around them, and this is part of that piece of paper. And in some cases, it hasn't done real well because it's disintegrated, but that's what this was, and they would stand them up. Okay, and then, and many, a lot of this stuff was very handwritten. Can I make this bigger? Even bigger. Open in full view. Okay. All right. to the extent that you can read this writing, and it's pretty good. Indisposable of his family, something, so it has to do with family. Worship to grant, so I'm thinking property. He did not have the for him by your, maybe a debt, let's see. So what I do is I just kind of skim through so I can get a flavor of the soup because I'm an attorney, so I kind of know what I'm looking for. But I would suggest just start skimming through. Come on. Oh, sorry. Next. This piece here is the side. It's kind of like the little index that went on the side of the file. Again, some of them survived better than others. Nice backhand here. Yeah, this is for some kind of bill. Bill means debt. And then we have the answer. The respondent denies it all. Okay.
Yeah, he actually moved his part of the family to Ohio.
Okay, all right.
To get away from it.
Yeah, so this is one of those family legends, right?
Serious.
Yeah. And these are, these are the costs. Let me see, this is a subpoena. Telling someone they need to show up in court. To Commonwealth, Virginia, to the Sheriff of Loudoun County, greeting, hello. You are commanded to do something on Adam Douglas to appear before the Justice of the Court of Loudoun in Chancery, right? And a bill in Chancery. So this may have had to do with real estate. As I said, Chancery cases are usually real estate or wills.
He had some other things too.
Yeah. Anyway,
But he was
1804. Oh, wow.
yeah, August 1804. Okay, anyone, closed case details? Do you want to pick another name? Someone else have anyone? Okay. How do I spell it?
OLDACRE.
OLDACRE. Nothing. So,
Put a K instead of a C.
well, no. See, you're more brave than I am. I will try your K. Backspace. AKRE. Nope, so what I do, nope, I see, don't give up. Let's just do old. Let's just do old. See what comes up under old. Because you only have to have part of the name. Oh, come on. Enter. Nothing even under old. So that, do you have another name?
Balch.
Hmm?
Balch, FOULKS.
Like that can't be misspelled. FAU?
FOU.
FOU. I'll tell you right now, I've seen it A plenty of times. FOU LK.
LKES.
So
ES.
I avoid ESs, right? Because they could have been,
Yeah.
you're just asking for trouble and you still got nothing. Let's try FAU,
Right, sometimes it's FALK.
right? FALK, Falk. Wow. That's Loudoun County name?
But I think it's too early because it was like 1750. So
Hmm.
you're not gonna have this, are you?
Maybe.
Started in 58.
Yeah, so he was here then. Yeah.
But I'm just surprised that there isn't an FAU,
LK.
oh, just an FAU
Mhm.
for Fauquier. I mean, why wouldn't that be? Plaintiff, oh, I'm sorry, equals, starts with, sorry. I had the wrong. Maybe it's just,
Or
The search at the
FALK.
bottom.
yeah. or the website's down because there's no way FAU is not in there. And you know how I test Alexander, because
Yeah, that's.
these Alexanders. Okay, well, it is working. Yeah, if you want to, Janie, yeah. Alexanders are big in this county, and so if you want to see, like, is the website connected, put in the name Alexander and it will tell you pretty quickly. Yes,
Would you get a broader hit if you just use the surnames thing at the bottom
oh, you know, no, I did. Oh, I'm sorry.
Plaintiff.
instead of just plain?
I know.
Oh, because it might be some of their relation.
Yep, yep. So FAU. You want FOU or
Either one.
let's try that. What includes,
Search.
James Oden. Mary Oden. You know those folks? Look at all the names in here.
Oh, see, there's a.
FOULE.
FOU. Okay, so we'll try FO. Okay. Still nothing.
FALK.
So again, don't be wedded to how your relatives spells their name. Anyone else have a Loudoun County name they want to try?
Try schooling,
How do you spell it?
SCHOOLEY.
Oh, yeah, look at that. What'd your family do?
George G.
We have Sammy, we have executor Mary Grant, Thomas, we have the admins of William Ho. Any of these? We have Jonas, Thomas Johnson. Or is there a particular school you're looking for? We have an infant, that could mean an adoption.
George T.
George T.
So does this cap at like 1912 or?
Mhm. George Cooper Jr. Oh, man, there's 4 pages. Okay, so,
Can you just put in G for the
yeah, it doesn't-
Adam first name?
so I'd have to go. So SCH. His name, G. No. So, you know, you'd have to play around with this, obviously, because just has surnames. Because I'm sure he's there, SCHOOLE. First name, G.
Do you have to take out? You
Yeah, I'll take that one out.
Top 10.
have to take-
No, I shouldn't bother. Yeah. But again, this is something wonderful to play around with. I'm going to go, how do I get back to? Okay, I briefly went over this, how the files are organized, names of the parties, the case number, the date, the index, how many pages, who's reviewed the file, the complaint, the answer, motions for judgment. So that's the end of the formal presentation. I'm happy to take questions if you have them. Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk about how you cross states? Like I have somebody that's from Monongahela County, Pennsylvania, that sometimes belong to Ohio, and sometimes they belong to Virginia, sometimes they were taxed by Pennsylvania. And so it's like.
So you have to go to each state. Like, I don't know what other states have chancery records because many states didn't even call them chancery matters. They were all at-law matters. So Virginia is nice because it actually had a separate filing system for chancery.
Start with Virginia.
Start with Virginia, right. I mean, it took me forever to find a relative from Virginia. I did find someone from Fauquier who was way back, who was originally from Frederick, Maryland, and apparently married someone from Fauquier before then they disappeared off to Pennsylvania. And you'll notice too, so when my family first got over here, they started in Connecticut, and then they went to Pennsylvania, and then they went to Ohio before they ended up in Michigan. But they all had the same county name, Fulton. Like, they all took the county name and just relocated, I swear, the whole county to a different state, right? So it doesn't help always to have the name of the county because there was a Fulton, Pennsylvania and a Fulton, Ohio. And fortunately, Michigan, they didn't have so many, they didn't, but again, you know, not only did I have, I'll call it the Malots, there was John and James, and then they married the same sister, Sarah, and then Sarah would die after having 12 kids, and he'd marry her sister, Susie, and it was just insane. So yes, ma'am.
So dower rights, if a woman's a widow
Mhm.
and she has a property, could she, sell that property and then just give the money to the child, or did?
No, you're seized of the real estate. Now, you're seized of the real estate. Now, you could bring a partition suit if you wanted to do that, but you just couldn't do it without court action.
But you'd have to do it with court action, but she wouldn't be, stuck on that land forever until she died. She could,
Well, there's nothing keeping her there.
right, she
But
could
she would
leave.
lose.
She'd probably
Right.
lose. And keep in mind, they didn't have the Married Women Property Act back then.
Right.
So, you know, I've never seen a suit, someone trying to dissolve their dower. So I don't imagine that it happened.
What about for the child? Like if she had, she's a widow, she's got, a child,
Mhm.
and she's supposed to take care of the property until,
No, she has a life estate. Well, no, she has a dower interest. She doesn't have to take care of anything. She just has a place to live.
Okay. And so if she remarried,
Then,
then it's gone.
well, because the property would go to her husband,
Right, and then he would.
and he doesn't get her dower interest.
So who would it go to?
It goes back to whoever the husband left it to.
Be like his child, maybe.
Maybe, if he died without a will,
Where?
right. So intestate succession, and it still works this way. If I die without a will, first to my spouse, if I don't have a spouse, then to my children. If I didn't have any children, then it goes up to my parents who are deceased, but the children of my parents, so my siblings. And then it goes down that way. So that's what happens if you die without a will. So if you don't have a spouse or children, again, they're going to look to your parents and then down to your siblings.
You talked about, don't be too concerned with spelling, but if like how close does it have to be? Like I have a relative whose name was Cherry Sparks, but in the will it says, you know, Chastity Speaks. But it's
Close
the same
enough.
place that they live.
Sure,
I mean, it's
sure, close enough.
I mean,
Right, and then if
close
you,
enough.
if you actually go look at the census and the handwriting of the person who's taking the thing, you're going to be able to ascertain they got it wrong, or they got some of the letters wrong. Yes.
So we have a comment from Chrissy. There's a wonderful new tool that became available a few weeks ago that helps with all this type of research as well. Family Search has a new full text search.
Okay.
Wills, land records, extensive land records for Loudoun County in particular.
Is that-
Family correspondent collections, you name it.
Is it free?
It is.
Okay.
You do have to, I will say, you do have to create an account, but
Sure.
Family Search does make it
Okay.
free.
And it may only be temporary, so use it so that they keep it.
Okay, all right. Yes,
So is that familysearch.com or .gov?
Well-
Family Search.
If you Google Family Search, it will pop up. I
Yeah.
don't remember if it's .org or .com.
well, now I know what I'm going to do this evening. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'm trying to ascertain how I can find records for a church.
Okay,
Probably built in 1894.
in Loudon.
So you did that.
There is a map that was created in Loudon that has all the churches on it.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm attending the church, but I want to look at records, like I
So-
want to see who.
So you can go to the courthouse if you have the name of the church. In order for the church to convey property in Virginia, it has to be voted on by the Board of Trustees. So you will find records in Loudon, if there was ever, like, how the church came to be. There'll be the trustee minutes, because whenever someone wants to sell property or transfer from one congregation to another, there's a process, a legal process that they have to go through. In fact, there was a church in Fauquier, and the woman conveyed the church, but she didn't convey any of the land around the church, except there was a letter, half of a letter, that said, you know, I intend for, you know, like the church steps and whatever to go with the church. And that was a big battle, right? Because the congregants in the church weren't getting along, and so someone wanted the church to dissolve. I mean, it was just, wasn't very nice.
Where would I find these trustee minutes?
They're recorded in the courthouse. So if you have the name of the church, you can look it up by the name of the church on the case name.
But there's nothing online. Everything would be at the courthouse.
Well, hang on, how do I get out to the internet?
Oh, second. Second.
Is everyone getting along?
Do you know assistance?
Yeah, I just want to get rid of this envelope so I can get out to the internet, and I'll show you where to find those right. If there's a name,
So
I'll show you something, hang on.
Why she's finding that, if the church was established in 1894 and nobody ever went back and did anything in terms of trustees or whatnot, then how do you determine who owns the church?
I cannot give legal advice.
Well, I'm just asking for historical information.
Yeah. Okay, Loudoun County, case information. Uh-huh.
You all said we can.
So go, let me see. I hate this new case status information. So this is through the Supreme Court thing, Circuit Court case information. 12 clicks later to get to this very unhelpful website. So. Oh, crap. I don't want Supreme Court. I want Circuit. Okay, we're gonna go to Loudon. So what's the name of your church?
Second, Mount Olive.
Second Mount.
Olive.
Okay, let's just try that. Let's just try that. Second Mount Olive. Of course, it's Baptist. So, yeah, so we have Second Mount Olive, you know, petition to change trustees. So now when it says, now the year, well, I don't think Loudon is, some counties, what's nice is the year is the first number, so you know what year. So this is 1991. It tells you so it tells you that there was something to change, and it doesn't have any pleadings. So it probably, appointment of a church trustee, substitute fiduciary, and then present decree and or order. So in 1991, so to get the actual paperwork, you have to go to the court, but this tells you that there was a case filed. Okay,
Understand what that is. Behind it.
yeah, so I'm gonna go back to the name list, and sometimes this name list will take you back to the name list, sometimes it will not. And it will just repeat, let's say you put in the wrong name list, it'll just keep repeating it, so you just have to go back out and start over.
There's four.
So there's 4 case numbers, let's try.
Second one is something.
Present decree and order.
Mediation.
Oh,
mediation.
That's what it said, order to.
So there was some, that one.
you think? Yeah. No, that's just. No, that's just placeholder. That doesn't mean that they were ordered to mediation.
What were the trustees?
So trustees is whenever you change a trustee or whenever the, let me see, try the second one, 12, that's the same as 1991. Yes.
Ms. Irby, I thought I saw the deed book and page
On the last one.
on the last file you did.
You did?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you got good eyes. I'm getting my
It's over
cataracts.
to the right. Oh, you're on a different case.
Yeah. Okay, let me go back. Name list. I was on the last one, right? I picked the last one. No, you probably did.
Page.
Oh, this isn't book and this is the circuit court record book and page.
Oh,
So when you go to the clerk's office and they say, we don't have the file here, this is what they would look up so that they could find it, and Judge Penn signed it, Carlton Penn. Yeah.
So then with that information, I can go back and back and back as far as.
Well, it looks like only to 1991. These records are online only to 1991. Now, the circuit court will have older records. But yeah, so there's that gap there between 1812 and 1991 that the circuit court will have in their repository, and you should be able to search it. Okay, all right.
Great.
Anything else? All right, well, it's been a pleasure, everyone. I think I was saying to Anna, I think this is the 15th year I've done it, maybe the 16th. So I don't know, in 4 more years, we'll have a 20th anniversary party. Celebrate the 4th anniversary of the 250th anniversary of Loudoun County. In any event, it's been a pleasure, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. And if you have any questions, you can email me at jirby@juridicalsolutions.com. Juridical, JURIDICAL solutions.com, or just put my name in Google and it'll come up, which is much easier, kind of like, finding the Library of Virginia index, just put in Chancery Records Virginia and it'll take you to the landing page. But thank you very much.
thank you.